Good afternoon, everybody. David Shuster here at Take Action News, We Act Radio. So glad to have you on board. A special salute to everybody who's watching us on our YouTube channel, Take Action News TV, listening on weactradio.com, takeactionnews.com. You know, I want to start right away in this final edition of 2012, and some of you may be looking at this show in 2013. I want to start with something we talked about last week, and that is DC statehood. DC statehood. A couple of people responded to last week's show and said, well, wait a second. D.C. is not like any other state. D.C. is not even the equivalent of any other state. Here are a couple basic facts about D.C. Washington, D.C. The population, according to the most recent census, places D.C. with a greater population than two states, Wyoming and Vermont. The population greater than two states. The Washington, D.C. has more members of the armed services, more people active duty military than two states. The gross domestic product of Washington, D.C., the total amount of output to the economy is greater than 15 states. Washington, D.C. produces more tax revenue for the federal government than 19 states. There are more college graduates in Washington, D.C. than 15 states. Oh, and by the way, more alternative fuel vehicles than 10 states. Washington, D.C. is beating out all of these states and all these factors that really matter. Tax receipts, tax revenue, population. It is time for statehood for the District of Columbia. Daniel Marins, welcome to the Google Hangout. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, David, and I couldn't agree more about D.C. statehood, but it's important to remember none of these things matter. It's not supposed to be about how much tax revenue you generate. The thing that matters is that there are people living here, and there are people living here that are citizens of the United States, that are treated as citizens for the purposes of military service, for federal taxes, for every other purpose but getting a voting representative in Congress. And that's a travesty.
I agree. I mean, look, 600,000 residents of Washington, D.C. And by the way, you know, here's the reason why D.C. is not a state right now. And that is because Washington, D.C. has more African Americans than 28 states. That's why D.C. is not a state. It's all about, I think, pure and simple, it's about racism. Because the idea that there are places in our country now, two states that have less population, they're going to have a couple of members of Congress and at least, 4 or 5 senators representing them, and D.C. can't get a senator who's got an actual vote in Congress?
That's right, David. 4 or 5 senators. I mean, if there are 2 states. No, just kidding. No, it's absurd, and it's almost like we need a voting representative to have the influence and the power to get a voting representative, and that's a tricky thing to overcome. But I have to say, I don't think that the privileged members of the city have really made it as big of a priority as it could be. And that's why I think it's so important that we are right here on Take Action News. Because, I think that there's some thinking, well, if your needs are taken care of, you're kind of sanguine about it, and there's just not really a need for it, You have your friends who live in Virginia, you have your friends who live in Maryland, maybe you can mooch off of their representative, but it's not really a good solution at all.
Hey, Mitch.
I would have to disagree with that assessment. I mean, there are definitely some, but being someone who grew up here and is friends and family with a lot of those people who you speak, they all want statehood tremendously, and they're out, they've been out in the streets canvassing for it and doing different efforts for that. And I think a lot of them are just sick of it. They just feel like there's no hope at this point, and no one else in the country is supporting us, and even other people in the city aren't fighting for it the way they should. So I think sort of everyone is sick of it by now, and just is it is getting to be more hopeless.
I'm with you. And by the way, folks who are paying close attention to Google Hangout, we're still trying to get the hangout of Google Hangout. As you can see, Daniel Marins has got a nice lower third, as we like to call it. It says Daniel Marins, executive producer. Then there's me in the middle with nothing. Then there's Mitch Mulaski, Vice President of Engineering. For whatever reason, I simply cannot get my Hangout toolbox to come up. So I cannot put my little Chiron on the screen, but we will get that fixed during one of the breaks. Special thanks to everyone seeing these little details about our YouTube channel. Remember, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel, Take Action News TV. You click subscribe, you get the clips for free. We slice and dice the clips, and you get them on a regular basis, a couple clips a day. That way we don't bombard you all at once, and it's a great way to keep up with the show. And thanks to I think we've already got now some 5,000 people who have watched the video, so thanks to all of you who are subscribers, who are watching the videos, and remember to hit us up on Twitter, twitter.com/takeactionnews, twitter.com/David Shuster. We love your suggestions and recommendations, and now that we also have video in addition to the audio going over WeAct Radio, there's all sorts of fun things that we can do, all sorts of props and little gadgets that we can introduce to this. But we're gonna pause as we always do in about 20 seconds and let our syndicated stations catch up with us. Special shout out to everybody in your nation's capital, Washington, D.C., Virginia, and Maryland, members of the WeAct Radio community. We pause now in a couple seconds to let our syndicated stations join us. You are listening and you're watching the Take Action News on WeAct Radio.